Canadians are voting in U.S. politics the only way they can. They're not coming to this country. They're not spending money here. They're not buying American goods. According to WWNY, a Canadian group has pulled out of the Fort La Presentación siege reenactment going on this weekend. And Canadian leaders are getting together to talk about what's next. If not the U.S., who else can they trade with? That's today's story of the day.
Support for Story of the Day comes from Pearsall Wealth Management at UBS Wealth Management USA, subsidiary UBS AG, member FINRA SIPC, 1 Broad Street, Glens Falls.
Hey, I'm David Sommerstein. It's Thursday, July 10th. First up, railcar manufacturer Alstom has won a major contract that's expected to bring hundreds of jobs to its New York production facilities, including one here in the North Country. The $2.3 billion contract is for more than 300 commuter rail cars for the New York Metropolitan Transportation Authority. It includes an option of up to 242 additional cars. Alstom says the contract is expected to create nearly 300 jobs at its production sites in Plattsburgh and Hornell, which is located in the southern tier. The newer cars will offer smoother rides, USB charging ports, and accessible restrooms. Workers at the Plattsburgh plant will assemble the bogies or undercarriages. Homeowners in Tupper Lake can now get help eradicating Japanese knotweed from their property. Amy Feiereisel reports.
Japanese knotweed is really hard to kill. Hand harvesting and even burning won't get rid of it. That's because just a small root fragment is needed for the plant to grow back. It overtakes open spaces really quickly, and that's part of why it's a big problem in much of the state. And as the Plattsburgh Press-Republican reports, Japanese knotweed has been gaining ground in Tupper Lake. While the New York DEC treats the plant on state land, it doesn't have jurisdiction or capacity to remove it on private property. That's why Tupper Lake is partnering with Adirondack Research, a not-for-profit group that specifically removes invasive species on private land. It's free for participants because it's funded through donations and grants. Tupper Lake is the program's newest service area for Japanese knotweed. Adirondack Research also treats Saranac Lake, Lake Placid, Blue Mountain Lake, Inlet, and Old Forge. Tupper Lake properties can sign up now to have their Japanese knotweed eradicated using an herbicide this fall, when it's most effective. That'll allow Adirondack Research to plan its route ahead of time. Treatment is set to begin in August. Amy Feiereisel, North Country Public Radio.
Before adjourning the 2025 legislative session, lawmakers in Albany repealed the 100-foot rule. That's a policy that requires utility ratepayers to subsidize gas line hookups for new customers. Christopher Casey with the Natural Resources Defense Council says this move can potentially save $200 million a year, and he says it'll help the state's transition to clean energy.
Rather than digging up the street and putting in highly expensive new pipe that's supposed to last for 100 years, it would actually be cheaper to electrify the buildings that are served by that segment of pipe and then shut down that pipe.
Casey says subsidizing the existing customer base just raises costs for everybody. But Republicans in the Assembly largely oppose the bill, saying that repealing the rule would make life in New York less affordable. Canadian leaders are in Quebec City this week to talk about trade. The country's economy is deeply tied to the U.S., but President Donald Trump's steep tariffs and threatening rhetoric about making Canada the 51st state have put that relationship in peril. Robert Wolf served as a Canadian advisor when the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade deal, the USMCA, was reached during Trump's first term. Wolf is a professor emeritus at Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario, and spoke with Emily Russell earlier this week about Canada's ongoing efforts to strengthen its economy beyond the U.S.
What was your reaction when this trade war between the U.S. and Canada started unfolding?
Not again. We've been through that in the first Trump administration and thought we had it solved with USMCA. So that was the first reaction. I think the reaction of most trade experts to the second Trump administration is that what the president wants to do with trade policy makes no sense. It will hurt the United States. It will hurt the world economy. It's just misguided from start to finish.
How have Canadian politicians responded? Yeah, what are you seeing there in the last few months that's been effective?
Well, I don't know what's been effective. We got a bit of a reprieve from the April 2 announcements by the president, but there's still much higher tariffs on various Canadian products than there ought to be. And it's having a real impact on the steel industry, on the auto industry, and other parts of the Canadian economy. So it's already a damaging trade war. If the Prime Minister and the President can't reach a deal by July 21, which is what the Prime Minister said they were going to do, then it could get much worse very quickly.
How important is it that Canada works out a trade deal with the U.S. by July 21st? How dependent is Canada on trade with the U.S.?
We're hugely dependent. We always have been. I don't know what the exact percentage is this week, 65, 70% of our trade is with the United States. Not all of it has to be with the U.S., but for example, in crude oil, we have established pipelines that run from Alberta into the U.S. Midwest. They can't go anywhere else. We need that market. It's huge for us. The same is true in the market for beef, where cows and processed meat go back and forth across the border all the time. The steel industry is heavily interdependent with the US, and the car industry is, by design, a single integrated North American market. So cars and car parts go back and forth across the border multiple times before they end up in a showroom. So obstructions to automobile trade are devastating for that industry.
What are top Canadian officials doing now to help try and boost the Canadian economy and, I guess, inter-Canadian exchange of goods?
Well, the Prime Minister has just pushed through a new bill to try to strengthen the Canadian economy, to make it easier to undertake major projects quickly, including more pipelines and rail links and port facilities, to make it easier to export to the world. But this bill is also aimed at improving trade within Canada, and there's been a lot of effort on that in the last few months. The First Ministers, the Premiers, and the Prime Minister have met more than once. They are on the phone periodically, trying to think about ways to remove trade barriers within the country. And in fact, there's a meeting starting today in Quebec City where the ministers responsible for internal trade, including the federal minister responsible, will be meeting to try to make further progress on removing internal barriers to trade.
What are you seeing just kind of in your everyday life, the way that Canadians are responding to this trade war?
Well, it's hard to disentangle the trade war from the president of the United States saying that Canada would be a big, beautiful 51st state. That really offends Canadians. It has made many people very angry. And the fact that he keeps saying it just makes it worse. So what you see is people who refuse to travel to the United States, people who only travel to the United States if there's some imperative reason that they have to. And so that's had a big effect on tourism numbers, way down. It also has an effect on what people are prepared to buy at the grocery store. So the big food chains are putting a little maple leaf beside any product that's sourced from Canada. Many people will only buy those products, and everybody that I know is reducing their purchases of U.S. products as much as they can. So that's both a trade thing, but it's also a Trump thing because of the 51st state comments.
What's been your personal experience? Like, how have you changed the way you, or changed the kinds of things you buy or where you go? And what's your kind of limit to the American products that you are buying now?
At this time of year, Washington state cherries are hard to avoid because I really like them. But for the most part, I'm not buying anything American in the grocery store. We've already canceled one trip to the United States for a big event that my wife would really have liked to go to, but we just decided we weren't going to the U.S. in the current circumstances. We have frequently, over the years, crossed the Thousand Islands Bridge and taken the train from Syracuse to visit a friend in the city. We're not going to do that this year. So, yes, it's made a difference to how we live our lives.
That was Canadian trade expert Robert Wolf from Queen's University speaking with Emily Russell. We have more news all the time on our website, ncpr.org. Music today by Evan Veenstra of Gananoque, Ontario, and David Archibald of Kingston. Music today by Evan Veenstra of Gananoque and David Archibald of Kingston, both in Ontario, Canada. I'm David Summerstein, North Country Public Radio.